My husband stood up at our company Christmas party, champagne in hand, and called me a leech in front of 200 people. He told everyone I was just arm candy riding his success. What he didn't know, I owned 87% of his billion-dollar empire. Let me tell you how this unfolded. Before we dive in, if you love stories about karma, justice, and women who don't play games, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. I'm Simone Laurent, and 9 years ago, I was just a 28-year-old software engineer trying to make it in Seattle's tech world. I wasn't trying to change the world. I was just good at what I did, really good, and I loved the work. Code made sense to me in a way people often didn't. I could see patterns, solutions, systems that others missed, and I had created something special, an algorithm that could revolutionize how companies analyzed data. I knew it was valuable. I just didn't know what to do with it yet. That's when I met Trevor Westfield. He walked into the coffee shop where I was working on my laptop, all confidence and charm, with this smile that could light up a room. He was a sales executive at a mid-level firm, always talking about the next big thing, always dreaming bigger than his current reality. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world, like your ideas mattered, like together you could build something incredible. Trevor wasn't a technical guy. He couldn't code to save his life, but he understood people, understood business in a way I didn't. And when I showed him my algorithm, his eyes lit up like I'd just handed him the keys to a kingdom. He said, "Simone, this is it. This is the thing that changes everything. Let's build this together. You're the genius behind it, and I'll be the one who brings it to the world." It sounded perfect. It sounded like partnership. It sounded like love. I agreed, but I wasn't naive. My grandmother had left me a substantial inheritance when she passed, about $2 million, and she'd always told me, "Baby girl, protect yourself first. Love with your whole heart, but keep your brain on." So I did something Trevor never knew about. I registered the company under a shell corporation I controlled, Laurent Holdings. Every patent, every piece of intellectual property, every founding document traced back to me. I funded everything with my inheritance. Trevor thought he was the visionary founder. He thought the investors believed in him. But really, they were investing in my technology, my company, and they just didn't know it yet. I told myself I did it out of practicality, out of protection. But the truth? I wanted to see if Trevor would love me for me, or if he'd love the power and the glory more. I wanted to believe in the man who promised we'd build this together. So I stayed quiet. I let him have the spotlight, and I told myself it was temporary, that eventually we'd stand together as equals. The company, Westfield Analytics, exploded faster than either of us imagined. Within a year, we had 50 employees. Within 3 years, we had 500. The algorithm I built became the backbone of data analytics for Fortune 500 companies. We were pulling in contracts worth hundreds of millions. And Trevor, he became the face of it all. Magazine covers, keynote speeches, television interviews. He was everywhere. The brilliant founder, the visionary CEO, the man who disrupted an entire industry. And me? I was just a senior developer. That's what my business card said. That's what people thought I was. Trevor's wife, who happened to work at his company. Nobody knew that every major technical decision went through me. Nobody knew that when the company nearly went bankrupt in year 2, it was my money that saved it. Nobody knew that the Trevor Westfield innovation they celebrated was actually me, working until 3 in the morning, solving problems he didn't even understand. We got married in 2017, a lavish wedding that made the society pages. I wore a dress that cost more than my first car, and I smiled for all the cameras. Trevor's mother made sure to tell me how lucky I was to marry her son, how I'd really moved up in the world. I bit my tongue and smiled wider. This was love, I told myself. This was partnership. The truth would come out eventually, but something started changing in Trevor. Success has a way of revealing who people really are, and what it revealed in Trevor wasn't pretty. He started dismissing my ideas in meetings. When I'd suggest a technical solution, he'd nod absently and then pitch the exact same idea 10 minutes later like it was his own. His new circle of executives, mostly men who'd never built anything themselves, treated me like a decorative object. The CEO's pretty wife who didn't understand the real business. The disrespect grew slowly, like a disease you don't notice until it's already infected everything. Trevor started making jokes about me, not understanding business strategy. He'd pat my hand condescendingly when I spoke up. Once, in a meeting about the algorithm's next evolution, something I'd literally created from scratch, he actually said, "Honey, why don't you let the engineers handle the technical stuff?" I was the engineer. I was the engineer. But I smiled and stayed quiet because I still believed he'd come back to himself. I still believed in the man I'd fallen in love with. Then came Bethany. Trevor hired her as the marketing director, a 26-year-old white woman with perfect teeth and an aggressive ambition that matched his own. She started staying late with him, taking private meetings, laughing at all his jokes. And Trevor, he started lighting up around her in a way he hadn't with me in years. My best friend Nia kept telling me, "Simone, you need to speak up. You need to tell him who really owns that company." But I wasn't ready. I wanted to see how far he'd go. I wanted to see who he really was when he thought he had all the power. The board meetings I wasn't invited to were the final insult. These were meetings about my company, making decisions about my technology, and I was excluded because I was just Trevor's wife. My attorney, Mr. Harold Green, kept calling me, reminding me that I could end this charade anytime I wanted. But I waited. Some part of me needed to see the truth play out completely. By December 2024, Westfield Analytics was worth $1.2 billion. We were in acquisition talks with a major tech conglomerate, and Trevor had planned this massive Christmas party at a luxury hotel downtown, 200 guests, all the investors, all the employees, even some press. He wanted to celebrate his success, his vision, his empire. I wore a red dress that night, stunning and bold. I felt proud of what we'd built, even if nobody knew it was we and not just he. The party was everything Trevor wanted it to be. Chandeliers, champagne towers, a live orchestra. He was in his element, working the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud. Bethany was practically attached to his hip, whispering in his ear, refilling his glass. I watched from across the room, and I could feel it coming. Something was building in the air, something that felt like an ending and a beginning all at once. Then Trevor decided to make a speech. He grabbed the microphone, already drunk on champagne and ego, and called everyone to attention. He thanked the board members by name. He thanked the investors for believing in his vision. He talked about his innovation and his company and his success. Every sentence was about him. And I stood there, waiting, wondering if he'd even mention my name. He did, finally. "And of course," he said, his words starting to slur, "I have to thank my beautiful wife Simone, who's been along for the ride." Along for the ride, like I was a passenger, like I was luggage. The room gave that uncomfortable laugh people give when they don't know if something's a joke or an insult. But Trevor wasn't done. Someone from the back, one of the newer investors, called out, "What does Simone do at the company?" It was an innocent question, a reasonable question. And Trevor's answer destroyed everything. "Simone?" He laughed. "She dabbles in coding. Mostly she plans our vacations and spends the money I make. Some might call her a leech, but she's my leech." He raised his glass like he'd said something charming, like he'd just paid me a compliment. The room went silent. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes turn toward me, watching for my reaction, waiting to see if the CEO's wife would cry or run or just disappear into the crowd like a good little leech should. But I didn't cry. I didn't run. I stood there for a moment, feeling something crystallize inside me. Clarity, purpose, the end of patience. 9 years of silence, 9 years of watching him take credit for my work, 9 years of being dismissed and diminished and disrespected. It all came down to this moment. And I realized my grandmother was right. I had protected myself, and now it was time to use that protection. I walked to the front of the room. My heels clicked on the marble floor, each step perfectly measured. Trevor saw me coming, and his smile faltered, just a little. Maybe some part of him, some tiny part, knew he'd gone too far. I took the microphone from his hand, and he was too shocked to resist. The room was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. "Thank you, Trevor," I said, my voice steady and clear, "for that introduction. I think it's time everyone knew the truth." I looked out at the crowd, at all these people who'd dismissed me, ignored me, treated me like an accessory. 9 years ago, I created an algorithm that would become the foundation of this company. I funded it with my own money. I registered it under my own corporation. Laurent Holdings owns 87% of Westfield Analytics. The patents, the intellectual property, the founding documents, they all trace back to me. I am not along for the ride. I built the car. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of 200 people's reality shattering all at once. Trevor's face went from red to white in seconds. That's not Simone. What are you?" He couldn't even form a complete sentence. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector screen behind us. Document after document appeared on the screen. Incorporation papers, patent filings, investment records, bank transfers, every single piece of evidence showing exactly who owned what. "Every major technical innovation this company has claimed," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "That was me. Every time we nearly failed and mysteriously recovered, that was my money. The visionary founder you've all been celebrating? He's a salesman who married the actual founder and convinced everyone, including himself, that he built this." I looked directly at Trevor. His eyes were wide with panic, with disbelief, with the dawning horror of a man realizing he'd destroyed himself. "As of this moment, Trevor Westfield, you are terminated. Security will escort you out." Trevor lunged toward me, and for a second I thought he might actually try to grab the microphone back. But security was already moving. 2 large men in suits took him by the arms. "You can't do this!" he screamed. "I built this company. I made you. You're nothing without me." His voice echoed through the silent ballroom as they dragged him toward the exit. Bethany stood frozen, her face a mask of shock. Some of the board members were already pulling out their phones, calling lawyers, calling advisors, trying to figure out how they'd missed this. I turned back to the crowd. "For those of you wondering about the stability of this company, let me be clear. Westfield Analytics will continue operating at full capacity. In fact, with proper leadership finally in place, I expect we'll exceed all projected targets. The acquisition talks will proceed as planned, but now you'll be negotiating with someone who actually knows how the technology works. Any questions?" There were no questions, just stunned silence and the sound of Trevor's distant shouting as security removed him from the building. The next few weeks were chaos. Trevor's lawyers came at me with everything they had, threatening lawsuits, claiming fraud, demanding his fair share. But my attorney, Mr. Green, had prepared for this for years. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. The company ownership was documented beyond any shadow of doubt. Trevor had no case, and eventually his lawyers told him so. The divorce papers were filed within a month. The tech world exploded with the news. Headlines like "The Real Founder Revealed" and "Tech CEO Exposed as Fraud" dominated every news cycle. Some people criticized me for staying silent so long. They asked why I'd let Trevor take credit if I'd really built everything. But I knew why. I'd needed to see who he truly was. I'd needed to know if the man I loved could respect me when he thought I had nothing. He couldn't, and that told me everything I needed to know. My first day as the public CEO of Westfield Analytics, which I promptly renamed Laurent Analytics, was surreal. Walking into that office, having people actually listen when I spoke, seeing respect instead of dismissal in their eyes, it felt like breathing for the first time in years. The stock price actually went up when the news broke that the real technical genius was taking over. Investors who'd met with me and Trevor over the years started coming forward, saying they'd always wondered why the CEO seemed so vague about his own technology. I restructured the entire company. Bethany was let go, along with several executives who'd been particularly dismissive of the female employees. I promoted people based on merit, not networking skills. and I made sure that every person in that company, especially the young black women in technical roles, knew that their voices mattered, that their ideas had value, that they didn't have to hide their brilliance to make someone else comfortable. Trevor? Last I heard, he's unemployed and living in a small apartment across town. His reputation in the tech world is destroyed. Nobody wants to hire the man who took credit for his wife's work. His mother stopped calling me to tell me how lucky I was. Bethany moved to another city. And me? I'm thriving. The acquisition went through, but I negotiated it, so I maintained control. Laurent Analytics is now valued at over $2 billion, and every single person knows exactly who built it. So that's how a Leech ended up owning everything. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Never underestimate a quiet woman who's been watching and waiting. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is actually the most powerful person in the room. Drop a comment telling me what you would have said at that microphone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because I've got more stories about underestimated women who came out on top. Hit that like button if you're Team Simone. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the person in the background is actually running the whole show.